out with me this late night. Since it is late night, I'm doing late night philosophy again. And I'm putting a little twist on it. This time there won't be a specific subject. Today is going to be Ask Me Anything, late night philosophy. Or rather, late night philosophy, Ask Me Anything. Which, well, it works either way. So it's Ask Me Anything, but it's about philosophy. Got it? So ask me anything about philosophy. How about that? So, but it's the late, I call it the late night philosophy because it's late night. So I started calling this late night philosophy. Basically, to um, resemble the type of stuff that would go on with undergrads where, they would just have these little late night bull sessions talking about any or whatever thing. And it's usually about something academic or maybe about women, but especially like like people like around their sophomore year start knowing just a little bit of their major just to be able to talk about it. And this definitely happened in philosophy. So that's what we're doing. Um, and if there's not too much talk, I do have my trusty philosophy textbook on hand to look at some selections, which after I hydrate, I'm probably going to go into looking at these selective readings right now until I see some people pop up, if anyone pops up. It's Friday night. Some people are getting it in. Some people are got in. Some people are at the club popping bottles. Um, I feel sorry for people going clubbing nowadays though. The club life sucks compared to the 2000s and the 90s. I don't know about the 80s. I don't know what the 80s clubs were like, but I know about the late 90s and the 2000s, the 99 and the 2000s. So if you're not here to talk with me because you're out there doing the club night thing, you know, kudos. I'll just say that you didn't have as much fun as I did when I used to hit the clubs back in the day, and that's facts. But let me finish drawing some more water and let's get into it. But again, for everyone just coming in, hello everyone. This is called Late Night Philosophy. Ask me anything. So you can ask me anything about philosophy, um, or philosophy related. So anything philosophy related, metaphysics related, ethics related, science related, um, stuff like that. I'm not giving my age and all that sort of stuff. I used to give out a lot of information about myself. I stopped doing it because there's too many people who try to use your personal information. So don't feel comfortable doing that anymore. But you can ask me. I'm doing well. Thank you, Lizzie. But you guys can ask me any questions related to philosophy or anything academic related. That's what I'm here to talk about tonight. Late night philosophy. Ask me anything. And I do have one of my philosophy texts here, in case things dry up and I need to talk about, bring something up to talk about. So, um, so in some of my previous late night philosophy editions, I used to have like specific topics. So I've actually read whole selections from classic. works of philosophy. Like I've read Plato talking about the death of Socrates. I read I read a reading on existentialism from a contemporary point of view. Um, I read Bertrand Russell talking about the value of philosophy. Um, I read one of my professors' um, papers on meta atheism. So, um, but it's all good. So, and I might have to put on my glasses so I can read these, so I can read some of this stuff. So, until someone brings up a philosophy question, I am going to look at some readings that I can bring up to kind of juice things up a little. So, as there's no one currently active in the chat room, it'd be a perfect time to look at some readings. But um, nope, not a teacher. I don't have the patience. Let's see what I could look at for reading. Huh. Um, Definitely something I haven't read before. I definitely wanted to talk philosophy because I just got a new textbook from a former professor of mine who I found out last year died during the pandemic. So that kind of upset me. I don't know. So he would have been of advanced age when he passed away anyway. But I'm not sure if his advanced age is why he passed away. It was probably COVID related. Probably. So, hmm, I think did I read the myth of Gaiji's ring? I don't think I read that on here before. I don't think. So I also read the on Woman's Day. I actually read something a classic feminist essay from Mary Wollstonecraft called "The Rights of Women." So I keep it. I try to keep it well balanced. And I don't even advocate for feminism, but I thought that that would have been a rather apropos um, reading for Women's Day. So I read that. Um, yeah, I read John Stuart Mill on Liberty, I believe. Yeah, so I've read quite a bit of readings from this particular text. Um, I'm just looking at where I want to go with it tonight. I might do a few instead of just one. So let me get over here all the way to the end to um, um hmm. Yeah, so there might be three of these little readings I could do here in the epilogue of the text, talking about just basically I guess the value of philosophy itself, well, values in society. That is an actual domain of philosophy is value, um, separate from morals, but similar to that is like talking about values and judgments, stuff like that. So here's one by Robert Nozick, who's a philosopher. I think he's still alive. I'm not sure, But so let me explain who he is. Okay. And again, this is Ask Me Anything late night philosophy. So feel free to interrupt me and ask me a philosophy question, and I'm a, break from what I'm reading so I can answer you to anyone who's here. So Robert Nozick taught philosophy at Harvard University. His writings range from across the entire spectrum of philosophy, but he is perhaps best known for his controversial contribution to political philosophy, Anarchy, State, and Utopia. He is the author of Philosophical Explanations, The Nature of Rationality, Socratic Puzzles, and Invariances, The Structure of the Objective World. No, oh, dang. No, he's no longer with us. He said Nozick died in 2003. In this selection, he suggested there may be no way to tell whether we are fiction or real. So we're not going to read that one on fiction because that's a longer, that's a longer thing. Pause. Pause. Um, Instead, we're going to read his selection on a portrait of the philosopher as a young man. Okay. Well, I am, and you guys can listen if you choose. So this is Robert Nozick um, writing this. He says, when I was 15 years old or 16, I carried around in the streets of Brooklyn a paperback copy of Plato's Republic from front cover facing outward. I had read only that I had read only some of it and understood less, but I was excited by it and knew it was something wonderful. How much I wanted an older person to notice me carrying it and be impressed to pat me on the shoulder and say, I didn't know what exactly. I sometimes wondered, not without uneasiness, what that young man of 15 or 16 would think of what he has grown up to do. I would like to think that with this book he would be pleased. It now occurs to me to wonder also whether that older person whose recognition and love he sought then might not turn out to be the person he will grow up to become. If we reach adulthood by becoming the parent of our parents, and we reach maturity by finding a fit substitute for parents' love, then by becoming our ideal parent ourselves, finally the circle is closed and we reach completeness. So he wrote. So this comes from his book, The Examined Life in 1989. Um, so I never, well, I've never carried around Plato's Republic, but I was a nerdy kid, and I did used to like often have books that I would check out from the library. Or particularly, I used to have philosophy books that, I mean, not philosophy, sorry, martial arts books that I would buy and bring with me when I came to school, like little martial arts books and stuff. And everyone knew I was like the kung fu guy. Some people called me Ninja Man when I was in high school. And yeah, I used to always carry around books. Now, when I was in college, um, this is like in my early 20s. I would sometimes carry around some of my textbooks that I read even when I wasn't studying, just to read them for my own edification for fun. And I'd be on public transportation just reading stuff, and people would sometimes ask me or inquire, what I'm reading, and I would tell them, and it felt good to let them know I'm reading Descartes' Discourse on Meditations. And I would tell them, it's a textbook, and they're like, "Oh, I thought you were just reading it for fun." And I would just smile because I actually am reading it for fun. What they didn't understand is, yes, it was an academic textbook, but the academic textbook I had on me, I was reading for my own for fun. I wasn't reading out of necessity. Like, these were usually books I was reading after the course was actually over. So here's another short philosophy reading. This one is from Freeman Dyson. It's called "On Becoming a Philosopher." So Freeman Dyson is a philosophy of physics at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. That's where Einstein used to work, guys. Besides his work in theoretical physics, he has written popular meditations on the problems of war, the human condition, nuclear weapons, and the universe in disturbing the universe, uh, weapons and hope, and infinite in all directions. The following excerpt is from a letter Dyson wrote about his longtime friend and fellow physicist, Richard Feynman, who won a Nobel Prize for his work in particle physics. So before I do that, I'm going to hydrate again because my voice is parched. Thank you guys for, well, I mean, no one's in the chat room right now, but for people watching this on replay, thank you for sticking by when you guys see me drinking water. As I know it can be jarring just seeing some content creator just pausing in between what he's saying and drinking water, but yeah. Anyway, so this is on Becoming a Philosopher by Freeman Dyson. April 1st, 1981. Dear so and so, I just spent a marvelous 3 days with Dick Feynman and wish you had been there to share him with us. 60 years and a big cancer operation have not blunted him. He is still the same Feynman that we knew in the old days at Cornell. We were together at a small meeting of physicists organized by John Wheeler at the University of Texas. For some reason, Wheeler decided to hold the meeting at a grotesque place called World of Tennis, a country club where uh, Texas millionaires go to relax. So there we were. We all grumbled at the high prices and the extravagant ugliness of our rooms, but there was nowhere else to go, or so we thought. Um, but Dick thought otherwise. Dick just said, "To hell with it. I am not going to sleep in this place." Picked up his suitcase and walked off alone into the woods. In the morning, he reappeared, looking none the worse for his night under the stars, and he said he did not sleep much, but it was worth it. We had many conversations about science and history, just like in the old days. Um, but now he has something new to talk about, his children. He said, I always thought I would be a especially good father because I wouldn't try to push my kids into any particular direction. I wouldn't try to turn them into scientists or intellectuals if they didn't want it. I would be just as happy with them if they decided to be truck drivers or guitar players. In fact, I would even like it better if they went out in the world and did something real instead of being professors like me. But they always find a way to hit back at you. My boy Carl, for instance, there he is in his second year at MIT. All he wants to do with his life is to become a goddamn philosopher. Okay. Oh, that's funny. It's especially funny if you know Richard Feynman because he did not particularly respect philosophy. A lot of physicists, a lot of physicists have some antipathy towards philosophy, particularly philosophy of science. So that's especially funny. And again, this comes from the personal correspondence of Freeman Dyson. Um, so this was used by his permission in this textbook. Um, uh, I'm gonna do another one, okay? I will say about this, you know, I hope I am, even at my age, I'm still aspiring to have a kid or two. And like Feynman, I don't really care what they choose to become, and I'm not going to tell them what I'm not going to tell them what are the right beliefs to hold or whatever. I'm just going to teach them how to think and give them those tools. After I teach them how to think and how to use those tools, from what they extrapolate from using those tools is completely on them. If they choose to be religious, I'm cool with it. If they choose to be non-religious, like I am, I'm cool with it. If they choose to have a scientific worldview, like I have, I'm cool with it. If they choose to be instead spiritual or into mumbo jumbo, I'm cool with it. Um, if they want a life in academics, I'm cool with it. If they want to go into law enforcement or military, um, as I once did, I'm cool with that. If they choose to go into business or athletics or entertainment, I think if they wanted to get back at me, what what would it be? What do I particularly hate as far as occupations? Um, Probably lawyers. No, no, I'm just raging at my father. But no, I wouldn't care if they became a lawyer. That would be great. Um, I don't know. I don't really trying to really think of what I'd really dislike. Oh, I know what I dislike. People in the financial service sector. I can't stand them. So that would be that would probably be what would irritate me if they decide to go into the financial service sector, and be one of those little drug using financial service people who make a lot of money, blow it all on blow, and rinse and repeat. I that I would hate that. All right, let me go ahead and let me do another selection for you guys. This is called Feisty Fragments. This is by Vincent Hendricks. So Vincent Fredericks um, was associate professor of epistemology, logic, and methodology in the Department of Philosophy and Science Studies at the University of Roskilde, Denmark. Is one of the leading epistemic logicians in the world today. Epistemic, guys, refers to like um, knowing, belief, and rationality. So when you hear someone, if you ever hear someone talk about that in like a paper or everyday life or whatever, when they say an epistemic, usually they're referring to knowledge, beliefs, and rationality. Okay. So anyway, he is the editor in chief of Synthesis Library Series with John Simons, director of Phi Logic, the Danish network for philosophical logic and its applications, founding editor in chief of Phi News, the free newsletter of philosophical logic and its applications, as well as the author of more than 30 scholarly articles and 4 books, including The Convergence of Scientific Knowledge, A View from the Limit, Forcing Epistemology, and Feisty Fragments. So again, that's what I'm reading right now. Feisty Fragments. There's a theory which states that if ever anyone discovers exactly what the universe is for and why it is here, it will instantly disappear and be replaced by something even more bizarre and inexplicable. There's another theory which states that this has already happened. Douglas Adams, English author. um, I must study politics and war so that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. John Adams, American president. Uh, the philosopher has never killed any priest, whereas the priest has killed a great many philosophers. Denis Diderot, French philosopher. Good point. The process of thinking about philosophy always reminds me of fireworks. One question is shot up and burst into a splendid many answers. Forget answers. The spectacle is all in the questions. Rebecca Goldstein, American philosopher. She's also the wife of cognitive scientist Steven Pinker, and she actually has done a nice little series here on YouTube, where she gives sort of like an introductory tutorial in the beginning of philosophy of the history of philosophy. I hope she would finish it because she got all the way up to about I think she went from the pre-Socratic philosophers, the very beginning of philosophy, up until Rene Descartes, and then I guess she stopped there. I was thinking it would continue, but hopefully she does some more. She seems really cool. She doesn't teach in academia anymore, I don't believe. A lot of philosophers have started to disdain the academic institution and its limits on free thought, ironically, and also the sort of the bureaucracy, which sometimes runs counter to how philosophers like to operate. So you see this with Peter Boghossian as well, who's also here on YouTube. Someone else, he's a philosopher I really like. Let me finish the feisty fragments. Nothing appears more surprising to those who consider human affairs with a philosophical eye than the easiness with which the many are governed by the few. David Hume, English philosopher, one of my favorites. Philosophy begins in wonder, and at the end, when philosophic thought has done its best, the wonder remains. Alfred North Whitehead, English mathematician and philosopher. And one last one. In philosophy, the winner of the race is the one who can run most slowly, or the one who gets there last. Ludwig Wittgenstein, Austrian philosopher, who's probably my favorite. I've mentioned this before when people have asked me who's my favorite, and Ludwig Wittgenstein is probably my favorite philosopher. Um, besides other people like, um, besides I guess Plato himself, and who else would be my favorite? So Ludwig Wittgenstein, Plato, um, oh, and what's his name? And Quine, Willard Van Orman Quine. Those are like my three. Those are my three favorite philosophers. Um, and I'm at the glossary. So let me check my chat filter here. I realize I'm just not getting anyone talking, and that's cool. I mean, it's not cool, but I would like to, you know, possibly stretch this out a little bit more. Pause. This pause thing has really ruined conversation, hasn't it? God, I would say pause after everything. Now everything sounds dirty. um, Let me find something else to read to you guys. I mean, it's a lot of stuff I would actually like to read to you guys, but I know some of it is just going to be too dry. A lot of stuff is either going to be too dry for a layman in philosophy, or it's going to be too abstract. So I gotta hit that sort of balance where it's not too dry and it's not too abstract, and also the reading isn't too long that I will lose people's attention. So it's always that sort of balance. That's why those I wanted to read those three those short selections at the end of the text because I knew they would be very uh, terse. Huh. Karl Marx, Alienation and the Power of Money. I wonder if anyone would be interested in hearing that one. Um, hmm. I don't know about that one. Um, and again, guys, I know no one's currently active in the chat room, but feel free to give me your questions. And if you're watching this on replay, you can give me those philosophical questions in the comment section and I'll answer them. As long as they're asked in good faith. I get a lot of jokers, to put it nicely, that sometimes put insincere things in the comment section. I mean, that's to be expected of social media. But if it's asked, if you're asking something in good faith, I will answer it. Um, so looking at something not too dry, not too abstract, and not too long. And I'm not gonna say pause again, even though I just said it. I'm tempted to talk about the religious stuff. Um, so as I've mentioned before, I've once did a selection from my read a selection from my former professor George Ray, who wrote Meta Atheism, and I think he had did a follow up called "Does Anyone Really Believe in God?" I'm tempted to read that. Mm. And I really wanted to when I had when I had plans and um, taking a doctoral program in philosophy, I actually wanted him to be my faculty advisor, because usually you want to work with someone. So when you go into when you're a doctoral candidate, um, typically whatever research your faculty advisor is doing is the research that you're going to be doing. So you want to make sure that when you decide which school that you're going to, that you are interested in the research of that person who is doing that, who is going to be a faculty advisor, because effectively you're going to be doing you're going to be working under their research program. And if you try to do some research outside of that, it's that probably well, depending on what field you're going in, that's probably not going to work. Like typically whatever research your faculty advisor is doing is pretty much the research you're going to be doing as well. So you should definitely have interest in it. And so I did have strong interest in what he was doing, which was philosophy of psychology, particularly talking about computational theory of mind, stuff like that. So I'm wondering if I should double down on what he talked about before. Um, but this, even though this isn't a long paper for a philosophical essay. It would be it would be too long for for a live stream. I'm not even sure if there's anyone who's ever done this in a live stream, which was read philosophical selections. I might be the only one who's ever like sat down and read philosophical selections in a live stream. And I don't know if that's awesome or pathetic. It could be both. It could very well be both. Um, but yeah, I might read this at a different time, but I'm gonna set this aside for tonight. Although I'm very tempted to read it. I mean, I've already read it. I mean, read it to you guys, of course. Mm, but that doesn't mean I might not want to talk about bring up something else religious. Hmm. It's interesting they let George Ray have the last word in their selection on God when they have all these articles, really good ones. Um, it's funny he got the last word on that. I think that speaks for itself. Why? it's funny. He's pretty modest about his argument, but it's very well met. I'll say that. Um, hmm. Y'all want to read something religious? Oh, it goes. So let me just let you guys know from all the different subjects in this text. So part one is the beginning, um, philosophy. Part two is where and when. Part three is who, which means like referring to a person. Part four is freedom, referring like to basically free will and all that sort of stuff. Part five is knowledge. Part six is God. Part seven is reality, and I think that stuff would be too abstract for most folks. Even though that's some of the stuff I'm very interested in, that sort of metaphysics stuff. Part eight is experience. That might be a little too. That might be both too dry and too abstract. Nine is consciousness. I think a lot of people would be interested in that. Um, but it might be too abstract. Some of the stuff. Um, part 10 is death. I shouldn't say that. I should say unaliving here on YouTube. um, part 11 is meaning. Part 12 is ethics. Um, part 13 is values in society. So again, that's distinct from ethics, talking about value theory, stuff like that. And then there's the epilogue. And I've read everything from the epilogue. um, Definitely don't want to read anything about unaliving. That's a little bit morbid. um, and again, some of these I've already read in previous live streams. And like I said, I'm more than happy to take questions, yada yada. I was tempted to actually do another subject today, and I think I should have done it because my wife just told me, "Yeah, you should have done that instead." I was gonna talk red pill stuff, and that might have interested people more. Um, but I can do that tomorrow. We can do red pill talk. Um, so I think what I'll do, I can just keep reading from. So within each of these readings, they have boxes where it's like sort of like um, some thoughts related to that particular article written by someone else. So I might read stuff from the boxes instead of the full articles themselves. I think that might I think that might be better. Um, Potentially. So that's what I'll do. And like I won't drag this out too much. If I'm not getting any, obviously if I'm not getting too much feedback from folks, there's no point in dragging this out, but too much. Uh, so what I'll read, I'm gonna read some religious stuff, and then if people have questions, we can go from there. But I'll read some religious stuff, and then I might bring this to a closure. So here's one from Sigmund Freud, where he talks as religion as wish fulfillment. Both both Freud and Marx attacked were both atheists, Jewish people at the turn of the 20th century, um, intellectuals who thought that philosophy was being well, sorry, not philosophy, that religion was being used by some folks in a way to just kind of placate people. So this is Freud talking about religion as wish fulfillment, and this is from the book The Future of an Illusion from 1927. And hello to people coming into the chat. Again, this is Late Night Philosophy. Ask me anything. So you can ask me anything, related to philosophy, science, or academics, ideas, stuff like that. So anyway, so here's Sigmund Freud. At this point, one must expect to meet with an objection. Quote, well, then if even obdurate skeptics admit that the assertions of religion cannot be refuted by reason, why should I not believe in them, since they have so much on their side? Tradition, the agreement of mankind, and all the consolations they offer, unquote. Why not indeed? Just as no one can be forced to believe, so no one can be forced to disbelieve. But do not let us be satisfied with deceiving ourselves that arguments like these take us along the road of correct thinking. If ever there was a case of a lame excuse, we have it here. Ignorance is ignorance. No right to believe anything can be derived from it. In other matters, no sensible person will behave so irresponsibly or rest content with such feeble grounds for his opinions and for the line he takes. It is only in the highest and most sacred things that he allows himself to do so. In reality, these are only attempts to pretend to oneself or to other people that one is still firmly attached to religion when one has long since cut oneself loose from it. Where questions of religion are concerned, people are guilty of every possible sort of dishonesty and intellectual misdemeanor. Philosophers stretch the meaning of words until they retain scarcely anything of their original sense. They give the name of quote unquote God to some vague abstraction which they have created for themselves. Having done so, they can pose before all the world as deists, as believers in God, and they can even boast that they have recognized a higher, purer concept of God, notwithstanding that their God is now nothing more than an insubstantial shadow and no longer the mighty personality of religious doctrines. Critics persist in describing as quote unquote deeply religious anyone who admits to a sense of man's insignificance or impotence in the face of the universe, Although what constitutes the essence of the religious attitude is not this feeling, but only the next step after it, the reaction to it which seeks a remedy for it. The man who goes no further but humbly acquiesces in the small part which human beings play in the great world, such a man is, on the contrary, irreligious in the truest sense of the word. So when Sigmund Freud's saying that religion describes religion as wish fulfillment, he's basically saying that religious belief is a matter of self-deception. That's that's basically what he's saying. Okay, now here's Karl Marx. Here's the famous thing that people always quote, and they really don't even understand what Karl Marx is saying. Where he this selection is the opium of the people. So everyone always likes to quote Karl Marx saying that religion is just the opium of the people, but they don't really understand what he's saying when he's saying that. So I'm about to read that, and this comes from Contribution to the Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right from 1844. Um, and again, this is Karl Marx. Man makes religion. Religion does not make man. In other words, religion is the self consciousness and self feeling of man who has either not yet found himself or has already lost himself again. But man is no abstract being squatting outside the world. Man is the world of man, the state, society. This state, this society produce religion, a reversed world consciousness because they are a reversed world. Religion is the general theory of that world, its encyclopedic compendium, its logic in a popular form, its spiritualistic point d'honneur, its enthusiasm, and point d'honneur is just French for point of honor, obviously. Anyway, its moral sanction, its solemn completion, its universal ground for consolation and justification. It is the fantastic realization of the human essence because the human essence has no true reality. The struggle against religion is therefore immediately the fight against the other world, of which religion is the spiritual aroma. Religious distress is at the same time the expression of real distress and the protest against real distress. That's funny. Let me read that again. Religious distress is at the same time the expression of real distress and the protest against real distress. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, just as it is the spirit of a spiritless situation. It is the opium of the people. The abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is required for their real happiness. The demand to give up the illusions about its condition is the demand to give up a condition which needs illusions. The criticism of religion is therefore an embryo, the criticism of the value of the veil of woe, the halo of which is religion. Criticism has plucked the imaginary flowers from the chain, not so that man will wear the chain without any fantasy or consolation, but so that he will shake off the chain and cull the living flower. The criticism of religion disillusions man to make him think and act and shape his reality like a man who has been disillusioned and has come to reason, so that he will revolve round himself and therefore round his true sun. Religion is not the only illusory sun which revolves around man as long as he does not revolve around himself. So when Karl Marx says, you know, the opium of the people, he's saying religion is the opium of the people. Not to say it's a drug, but he's basically saying just like, you know, opioids are, you know, are hallucinogens, right? They're typed as a hallucinogenic drug. They can cause you illusions that take you away from the reality of the things that you have to face. That's what he's saying religion is doing. So there you go. Let me see if there's another religion one. William James, Abraham Maslow, hmm, John Hick. Hmm, these are all good, but hmm, see here. These some good selections. Is actually it's not so much I don't have anything good to pick to read to you to the chat. Is rather I have too many good things to read to the chat, so I'm trying to decide which ones to pick. Oh, there's a good one that says religion from an African perspective. Except this essay is a little too. I think this essay would be a little too long. Maybe another day for that one. Hmm. Yeah, I would be interested in reading that one, but that would be too long of a selection. So here's another religious one, guys, from William James. Uh, William James was a philosopher who created Amer. He created an American philosophy called pragmatism to distinguish it from pragmatism. It was originally, I think, pragmatism, but then some other people kind of changed his ideas, so he distinguished his by calling it pragmaticism. But William James, I think, was the founder of that school of thought, which originated here in America. So we do have some philosophy here in America. So pragmatism is so when you hear being pragmatic or pragmatism, um, that is a school of philosophy that originated here in America. It makes sense that Americans would create pragmaticism or pragmatism, whatever you want to call it. Um, and one of my favorite philosophers was also a pragmaticist, uh, Willard Van Orman Quine. Uh, but let me read this one. It's called On the Ultimate Insecurity by William James, and this is from the writings of William James. I went one evening into a dressing room in the twilight to procure some article that was there, when suddenly there fell upon me without any warning, just as if it came out of the darkness, a horrible fear of my own existence. It was as something hitherto solid within my breast gave way entirely, and I became a mass of quivering fear, and this the universe was changed from me altogether. I awoke morning after morning with a horrible dread at the pit of my stomach, and with a sense of the insecurity of life that I've never knew before and that I have never felt since. It was like a revelation. For months, I was unable to go out into the dark alone. In general, I dreaded to be left alone. I remember wondering how other people could live, how I myself had ever lived, so unconscious of the pit of insecurity beneath the surface of life. Wow, to me, that's hmm, well, to me that sounds more like that belongs in the category of existentialism than religion. But existentialism and philosophy of religion do um, have some parts that um, are inclusive to each other. Uh, And I think I'm going to read one more from religion. And this is going to go back to this is going to go back to the Bible itself. How about that? I think, to be fair, since I mentioned the atheist point of view from Sigmund Freud and from Karl Marx, and some existentialism from William James, uh, and I should probably give a little background to William James. Well, I kind of did, but I didn't really give it justice. But, so William James was the brother of the novelist Henry James, was born in New York City and educated at Harvard. He was he made outstanding contributions to psychology, which are found primarily in his book, The Principles of Psychology. He's one of the founders of scientific psychology, of making when psychology became a scientific discipline and not just speculative um, psychology or you know part of natural philosophy. In philosophy, he is best known for his development of a view called pragmatism, which he took over from the American philosopher and mathematician Charles Peirce, and for his contributions to philosophy of religion. James' goal in philosophy was the development of a point of view that would do equal justice to the claims of the exact sciences and also to those of moral and religious experience. His The Varieties of Religious Experience in 1902 is regarded by many as the best book on the topic ever written. In the following selection, James defends the possibility of free will by arguing that, for all we know, many of our choices could be undetermined, and yet our behavior be as intelligible as it is now. James also explains why believing in free will may have better consequences for our lives than not believing in it. That was also a point that the late Daniel Dennett believed as well. He thought, despite all the good arguments that free will is illusory and that is an unscientific concept in contemporary psychology, that we should uh, still believe that it's real, even if it isn't, because of studies suggesting when people are told that free will is illusory, that they tend to behave in ways that are um, more um, anti, you know, the, people, like when people are told that free will isn't real, they think that gives them some sort of carte blanche to act however they want, which is just fucking goofy. But so yeah, so William James, one of the things I don't agree on was he believed in free will, which is called being a libertarian, not libertarian in the political sense, but libertarian in the metaphysical sense. A libertarian in philosophy is someone who believes that there's a freedom of there's a human freedom of will of some sort, even though none of them can agree on what exactly that is. So anyway, like I said, so the last thing I'm going to read is straight from the Bible itself. And this comes from the Bible, from Genesis. This is Abraham and Isaac. I'm not reading this from the Bible, guys. I'm reading this from my philosophy text. So before anyone says what chapter and verses and yada 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 yada, I'm not reading from a Bible. I'm reading from a philosophical textbook, and it's going to be paraphrased. So if you're saying, "Well, that's not from the such and such," I never said it was. Just gotta preface that because I know people watching this on replay and I'd be like, what are you talking about, dude? So just prefacing that. Okay. So again, Abraham and Isaac. As it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and give thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took two of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And I think we both know what happened after that, right? Well, those of us watching this who come from a Judeo-Christian background, we know how this story goes, right? And this comes from a selection also in part 6 on God in this book, which is actually David Hume talking about God and evil, which is why this particular excerpt was kind of germane to that to that article from David Hume. So we know that he takes his son up, and and God tells him to do the do and unalive him, to which he was about to do so, and then God says, No, 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 don't do that. I was just, I was just, I was just testing you, gangster. And he's like, all right, and so he's happy because he doesn't have to unalive his son, and of course, Isaac, you know, you know how that goes. Abraham, according to the Bible, was the first Hebrew, right? And he was rewarded for his his full devotion to God, but in a lot of moral philosophy, he's actually seen as the bad guy, which is why in the selection by David Hume called God and Evil, it is a it is arguably that he was not the good guy in this story, although he was rewarded, uh, by the Judeo Christian God Yahweh, uh, for his devotion. One could say that that was quite. If that happened, obviously, if this happened in a modern context, we would find him patently. We would clearly find him criminally insane. Like, you took your son to do what? Yeah, throw him in Arkham. Throw him in Arkham, and throw the key away. Like, but it goes to show, and this is something what George Ray has talked about before, how when things that could be patently absurd, if they were put in real life, um, can still be found meaningful within a historical and religious context, right? Because in a obviously, if we were talking about this in today, we would just find him absolutely mad. And it's like, in the context of the story, it's a beautiful story, but it's still nonetheless insane. um, But I mean, I for one love mythology, religious mythology. One person's religion is another person's mythology. So as an atheist, I find this all to be mythology. I just find this to be uh, um, Judeo-Christian mythology. Just like I'm interested in Greco-Roman mythology and Scandinavian mythology, Germanic mythology, um, stuff like that. Japanese mythology, Chinese mythology. I find I find all that stuff interesting, but I don't take it any seriously than any other. And it's and this is so when people question like the atheists on how could they disbelieve, and you just have to remind them that well, for you to believe your in your faith, you by necessity have to view all the other ones as false. So we simply say, yeah, all of those are false, and so is yours. And there you go. So anyway, I'm going to bring this to a close because I have not gotten one question that was actually relevant to the live stream. Uh, so and that happens sometimes. Sometimes it's a swing and a miss. But I'm not going to drag it on though. So I'm gonna go. It's probably past. Yeah, it's past one. So already past my bedtime. So I'm gonna go since there's no questions or follow ups. However, if you are watching this broadcast on replay, feel free to ask me any question dealing with like philosophies, science, religion, history, academics generally in the comment section of this live stream. I'll be more than happy to answer to my abilities, to my abilities, because I'm not. I want to make it clear I'm not a professor in this. I'm just a nerd who knows a lot of random things. But I'm not a professor, so I want to make that clear. I'm just a nerd who happens to have a cornucopia of random knowledge. So, with that being said, I'm going to end this, guys. I'm going to do something different the next live stream, hopefully more entertaining. That's it. Thank you.